waiting till the content is ready. So far, we've been working on a website locally, with no noticeable lag every time the content is reloaded. Sadly, this isn't the way the web is experienced, and it's likely our images, scripts, and other assets will be a lot slower for our visitors. In this lesson, we're going to make use of some JavaScript to trigger a load event, and make use of animation play state. To continue from the previous lesson, open the sample code zip file and look for folder 04 Simplify Keyframes. A complete version of this lesson's code is in the folder 05 Wait Till Ready. When our animations assume everything is available straight away, we can create broken-looking pages with half-loaded images moving around. Let's make sure our content has loaded before the animations play. Browsers give us a handy JavaScript load event when content has finished loading. This includes assets such as images and scripts. We can add a listener and then kickstart our animations after the load event is triggered. To make sure this JavaScript event occurs quickly, we'll add the code to our index.html file. Near the end of the file, but before the closing body tag, set up the event listener. We type window.addEventListener, and then the event, which is load, a function to call, and then false. Then we write the function, in this case called showPage. Inside which we have an alert to show that it has loaded. What this says is that when the load event is triggered, the browser will run a function called showPage. The function then currently only calls an alert. Let's wire this up and see if it's working. In our browser, we now see that the alert triggers. It'll seem to happen straight away as the page is running locally and the big image isn't loading across the internet. We'll do some testing later to see how it performs, but for now we know that the event is being triggered. Let's make the showPage function add a class to the body element. In our JavaScript, we add a line to add a class to the body of our document. This JS loading class will be useful to tell when the content is still in the process of loading but hasn't yet completed. We're using the plus equals so that if there's a class already on the body, as many web servers might do, this won't overwrite any existing classes. Next, inside this showPage function, we remove this JS loading class. We do it by taking the class name and replacing the JS loading string. The idea here is that when the page loads, the browser will immediately append a JS loading class to the body, and then remove it once the page has finished loading the assets. Let's use this class to make the animations wait until the content is ready. We now have a handy JS loading class we can use in our CSS. There are a few ways we could approach using this. One way might be to override this animation property in each of the elements that we animate, setting it to none so that nothing happens while the JS loading class is in place. This would work and it might be quite useful, but it comes with the downside of cluttering our CSS with lots and lots of extra rules. It could make the code a lot more cluttered and difficult to read. Thankfully, there's a more elegant method. We can control the animation's play state using the property Animation Play State. The Animation Play State property is well supported by modern browsers. It tells the browser whether the current animation is running or paused. By default, the animations are running. We can use this property to make any animations on the page pause while we're loading the content. In our CSS, we add the JS loading class, and then an asterisk, and then the same again, but we also specify both the before and after pseudo elements. And inside this block, we state animation play state, paused, and we add in an important there to make sure it works. This code sets the play state of everything on the page to paused whenever the body has the class JS loading. When JavaScript removes the JS loading class from the body tag, the rule no longer applies and all animations will be in their expected running state. A nice benefit of this approach is that we don't have to change anything else in our style sheet. Let's see it in action. So what if the JavaScript fails? This is always a question worth asking if we rely on JavaScript to handle displaying content on the screen. Sometimes JavaScript fails. It can be disabled, plugins can do unpredictable things, and while in most cases this will work fine, JavaScript is always a little outside our control, so it's good to think about what would happen if the JavaScript didn't work as expected. In this case, I think we're okay. If the JavaScript doesn't run, it won't apply the JS loading class. The animations will play straight away. This might result in a little strangeness with the background image loading as it animates, but that's a worst case scenario and a reasonable fallback, I think. Let's test this to see it working. We need a larger image. I found this photo of Earth on unsplash.com. That looks great, but it's a hefty 1.8 megabytes in size. In our CSS, we change the background image on the header before block. To really see it in action, we can use Chrome's built-in throttling feature. Opening the inspector, select the Network tab. Then open the drop-down containing speed presets. From this, we select Good 3G, which should be slow enough to see this in action. We can now refresh the page. Since the image is quite large this time, you should see a blank screen until the content is ready. If you wanted to avoid a blank page at this point, you might want to have some loading text or animation that lets people know. It depends how long you think the delay might be. If you have a very large image and the page tends to wait for more than a second or two, then a spinner might be a good idea. On the other hand, it might be worth compressing the image more or scaling it down so that it loads more quickly. Experiment and see what works for you. On this example, I found that trying to show a separate loading message was too cluttered. It only showed for a fraction of a second and looked a bit like a glitch, so having the screen be blank for that half second was fine. By now, our landing page hero header is looking pretty awesome. We have an animated background, the content pops into place, we've optimized our keyframes and even ensured that it all works when the content is loaded. It's time to think about how we can apply these ideas to our projects. In the next lesson, you'll find links to examples you can download and make your own. Feel free to use them as you wish.